It was 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when a knock at my office door carved a line through my life. Everything before, everything after. I was glued to the clock, itching to bolt from the stuffy admin building at Westfield University in Spokane, Washington. "Come in," I hollered, eyes still locked on a budget spreadsheet that had been laughing in my face all afternoon. A scrawny kid with dark hair slipped inside, gripping his backpack like it held state secrets. Corey Platt. I'd spotted him around campus, but we'd never talked. He had that vibe, sharp but under the radar, the kind of student who knew more than he let on. "Mr. Harper," he said, voice wobbling just a touch. "Got something for you." He set a USB drive on my desk like it was a sacred relic, flashing a sly grin that twisted my gut. "What's this?" I asked, but he was already inching toward the door. "You'll figure it out when you look." The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with that tiny piece of plastic that would torch everything I thought I knew. I should have chucked it, should have wiped whatever digital venom it held without peeking. But after 13 years married to Marissa, watching her drift further away, her secrets piling up, her cold indifference slicing me deeper each day, curiosity won. I plugged in the USB. The video file popped up, time-stamped from last Thursday. The angel screamed a hidden camera, probably tucked in a shelf. I recognized the spot instantly. Marissa's office in the literature department, decked out with those cheesy inspirational posters and stacks of ungraded essays. My wife stepped into frame, but she wasn't alone. Gavin Reese lounged in the chair across her desk, 18, oozing the kind of smug confidence that comes from dodging real consequences. He was good-looking in that cookie-cutter way that drives middle-aged women wild. Sharp cheekbones, gym rat build, a grin that spelled trouble. "You handle it?" Marissa asked, her voice dipping into that sultry tone I hadn't heard aim my way in years. "Professor Harper, you stress too much," Gavin shot back, standing and sauntering around her desk. "Your husband's too busy fading into the background to notice anything." They shared a laugh that hit me like a fist to the chest. What came next had me slamming my laptop shut so hard the screen splintered. My hands trembled, stomach churning as I staggered to the tiny bathroom off my office and puked until my throat burned raw. Back at my desk, the laptop sat like a live grenade. I forced myself to open it again, bracing for the knife I knew was coming. The video dragged on for 12 more minutes. I watched every second, every glance, every whispered word, every moment that confirmed the suspicions I'd buried for months. When Marissa called Gavin her hidden ace while smoothing her blouse, something inside me snapped clean in two. The video wrapped with them chatting about Gavin's grade in her advanced rhetoric class. "A+, like I promised," Marissa purred, her fingers brushing his arm. "You've more than earned it." I sat there past 6 p.m., staring at a blank screen, the foundation of my life crumbling around me. 13 years of marriage, 5 years of hoping for kids that never came, countless faculty dinners where I grinned and nodded while Marissa dazzled everyone with her charm and brains, barely acknowledging I existed. The drive home to our place in Tacoma's hilltop neighborhood was a haze of fury and emptiness. I found Marissa in our kitchen, grading papers with a glass of red wine at her elbow, looking every bit the polished professor. Stunning, brilliant, and rotten to the core. "How's your day?" she asked, not even glancing up. "Fine," I choked out. "You?" "Oh, you know, student meetings, department stuff. Same old," she said, the lie slipping out so smoothly I almost admired her nerve. Almost. That night I lay beside her, wide awake, listening to her steady breathing while plotting my next step. The old me, Travis Harper, would have confronted her right then, demanding answers and probably ending up apologizing for snooping. But that guy died at 3:47 p.m. in my office. The new me knew knowledge was power, and I'd only scratched the surface. Westfield's student database was a joke, a clunky system from the early 2000s held together by digital duct tape. As an admin, I had access to academic records, grade histories, enrollment data stretching back 15 years. Gavin Reese had taken 3 of Marissa's classes over the last 2 semesters. His grades painted a picture: D+ in American Lit with Professor Kessler, C- in poetry with Professor Patel, but a perfect A in advanced rhetoric with Professor Marissa Harper. The grade logs told a bigger story. Gavin's initial grade in Marissa's class was a C+, entered May 15th. On May 18th, it flipped to an A, changed at 11:23 p.m. via Marissa's faculty login. I checked our text from that night. May 18th was when Marissa said she was stuck late doing departmental evaluations. She'd rolled in after midnight, reeking of wine, muttering about a faculty dinner that dragged on. But the real kicker was Gavin's disciplinary file. 3 complaints over the past year: inappropriate comments to female students, suspected exam cheating, and a hazing incident that mysteriously vanished without a trace. All 3 were handled by the same guy, Chairman Leonard Voss. Voss was old-school academia, rocking tweed jackets like it was still 1980, convinced his tenure made him untouchable. He'd been running the literature department for 12 years, long enough to act like he owned the place. I'd always found him slimy, the way his eyes lingered too long on female students and faculty. Now I wondered if Marissa was caught in his web, or if she was playing the game right alongside him. The next morning I hid a voice recorder in Marissa's office. It took 3 sneaky trips to get it right, slipping in during lunch breaks and late evenings when the building was mostly empty. The recorder was tiny, smaller than a pack of gum, with a magnetic back that clung to the underside of Marissa's metal filing cabinet like it was born there. I told myself I was just collecting ammo for a divorce lawyer, but deep down I wanted more than that. I needed to unravel every thread of their betrayal before deciding how to hit back. The first few recordings were dull as dirt: student meetings, calls with publishers about textbook orders, gripes about university red tape. But Thursday afternoon, I hit pay dirt. "Leonard, it's me," Marissa's voice crackled through the recorder's speaker as I sat in my office at Westfield University in Spokane. "We've got to talk about the Reese problem." "It's handled," came the gravelly reply from Chairman Leonard Voss, his voice tinny over speakerphone. "The family got a fat payout to hush up last year's mess." "That's not my concern," Marissa snapped. "Gavin's getting sloppy. Yesterday, he practically had his hands all over me in the hallway. Anyone could have seen." Voss let out a chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Young guys don't do subtle, but he's useful, right? And his dad's checks keep the department flush." "Useful?" Marissa's tone sharpened. "Leonard, I'm not some—" "Relax, my dear," Voss cut in. "You're a stellar professor who gets how academia works. Remember that plagiarism mess last spring? You needed tenure, I needed your vote on the curriculum overhaul. We both won." Silence hung for a few seconds. When Marissa spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost broken. "That wasn't the same." "Wasn't it?" Voss said, smug. "The evidence was flimsy, but you got your tenure, and I got my cooperation. Now you keep being the brilliant professor you are. Gavin graduates in May, his dad writes another check, and we all move on. Unless you'd rather explain to the tenure board why you've been tweaking grades for personal favors." The call ended, but I sat there staring at the recorder, letting the silence sink in. My wife wasn't just cheating, she was trapped in a blackmail scheme. But instead of pity, all I felt was icy fury. She'd traded our marriage and her principles for a leg up in her career. That evening, Marissa came home with a bouquet of lilies and a bottle of wine, suggesting we hit up the little French bistro in Tacoma's Proctor district where we'd had our first date. Guilt, probably, for her side hustle. "You've seemed off lately," she said over candlelit cocoa vin, her hand brushing mine across the table. "Work's been a beast," I said, letting her fingers lace with mine while my brain churned through strategies. Budget slashes, layoffs, the usual admin hell. She nodded, playing the caring wife with a performance that could have won awards. "I know I've been a lousy partner too," she said. "Tenure stress, committee crap, it's a lot, but we'll make it through." I agreed, but not in the way she thought. The old Travis would have eaten up this moment, convincing himself we could fix things with a heart-to-heart or some therapy. But the new Travis knew some things. Once broken, stayed broken. I was done being a ghost. Time to step into the spotlight. 3 days later, Corey Platt found me in the parking lot, popping up behind a pickup truck like some low-budget spy. The kid had a knack for theatrics. "You see it?" he asked, straight to the point. "Saw it," I said. "What's your angle?" He shrugged, hands buried in his coat pockets. "Fairness, I guess. Sick of watching rich punks buy their grades while kids like me bust our asses for scraps?" "How many others have you got on tape?" I pressed. "Enough," he said, his grin sharp as a blade. "Professor Harper's not the only one playing fast and loose with grades, if you catch my drift." I studied him, seeing a flicker of my own quiet rage in his eyes. Corey was invisible too. Just another scholarship kid from Spokane's Hilliard neighborhood, fighting a system rigged against him. But unlike me, he'd armed himself with tech and guts. "I need more," I told him. "Everything you've got on Voss." "That'll cost," he said. I slipped him $500 cash, more than most students see in a month. His eyes widened, but he pocketed it like a pro. Faculty galas tomorrow night, he said. Big donors shindig at the president's mansion. Cameras everywhere. But I know a few blind spots. I'll get what I can. The gala was a yearly ritual, a chance for fat cat donors and board members to sip overpriced wine and pat themselves on the back for supporting education. Marissa had been hyping it for weeks, splurging on a new dress and booking salon appointments like it was prom night. I watched Marissa get ready that evening, dabbing on makeup with the focus of a general prepping for battle. She looked like $1,000,000, polished, poised, every bit the star professor. It'd be one of the last times I'd see her like that, all confidence and untouchable charm. "Are you sure you're skipping this one?" she asked, but we both knew she liked flying solo at these things. I was the boring admin husband, the guy who handled spreadsheets while she dazzled the academic elite. "Got budget reports to wrap up," I said, leaning against the doorframe of our bedroom in Tacoma's Proctor district. "Knock 'em dead." She pecked my cheek, leaving a smudge of lipstick I didn't wipe off until her car vanished down the street. The footage Corey dropped off the next morning was worth its weight in gold. 12 minutes of crystal-clear video showing Chairman Leonard Voss and Marissa tucked in a corner of the university president's library during the gala. Their talk was heated, too close for comfort. The audio was pristine. "The board's sniffing around about grade inflation," Voss said, his hand lingering on Marissa's lower back like he owned her. "Nothing major yet, but we gotta tighten up with Gavin." Marissa leaned in, her voice barely cutting through the party chatter. "I'm worried about the whole mess, the donations, the grade tweaks, those complaints that keep vanishing." His fingers grazed her spine, slow and deliberate. "You've been careless, darling. Passion makes people sloppy." "I didn't sign up for this to get so messy," she whispered. "But it is messy," Voss said, pulling her closer. She didn't pull away when he brushed his lips against her neck. "Don't stress. I've been covering for faculty like you for years. Just keep playing ball." The threat was clear as day, even if he didn't say it outright. Marissa shut her eyes and nodded, like someone who'd given up the fight ages ago. I watched that clip 5 times, burning every move and word into my brain. Then I started making backups, lots of them. At 6 a.m. the next day, I fired off an anonymous email from a burner account through a VPN, hitting every trustee on the Westfield University board, the student papers editors, and 3 local journalists who ate up education scandals. The subject line was blunt: academic corruption at Westfield University. No text, just the video file and a timestamp. By 10 a.m., my phone was blowing up. Reporters, board members, you name it. By noon, Voss had called an emergency department meeting. By 2 p.m., campus security was walking Marissa out of her classroom while students recorded the whole thing on their phones. I watched it all from my office window, sipping coffee, a dark satisfaction spreading through me. The old Travis would have felt bad about tanking his wife's career. The new Travis felt like a guy who just played a perfect hand in poker, watching his opponent realize they'd lost everything. Marissa called me 17 times that afternoon. I let everyone go to voicemail, her voice getting more desperate with each message. "Travis, something awful's happened. Someone recorded me and Leonard at the gala, and now they're saying, please pick up. I need you. I know this looks bad, but it's not what you think. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? There are reporters outside our house, and I don't know what to do." The last one hit at 6:15 p.m. "I know it was you." I deleted them all without a second listen. When I pulled into our driveway that evening, Marissa was slumped on the front steps, still in the same clothes from that morning. Her makeup was streaked, her hair a mess, like the weight of her exposed lies had shrunk her. "Why?" she asked as I walked up. "Why what?" I unlocked the door and stepped inside, not offering her a hand. She trailed me into the kitchen, where I started heating up a can of chili like it was just another Tuesday. "Don't act dumb, Travis," she said, voice shaking. "I know you sent that video." "No idea what you mean," I said, stirring the pot, the routine feeling almost comical given the chaos. "The board suspended me pending an investigation," she said, her voice breaking. "Leonard's on leave. They're talking criminal charges. My career's done." "That's rough," I said, eyes on the chili. "But you're smart. You'll land on your feet. Always do." She grabbed my arm, forcing me to look at her. "Travis, please, I screwed up, I know, but—" "Screwed up?" The words came out sharper than I meant. "Sleeping with your student was a screw-up. Changing his grades was a screw-up. Lying to me for months was a screw-up." Her face went pale. "How'd you know about Gavin? The grades, all of it?" I shook off her grip. Because I'm good at my job, unlike you. And unlike Voss, I don't need to strong-arm people to get what I want. The truth crackled between us like a live wire. Marissa's facade shattered, and she started sobbing. Raw, messy tears that might have gotten to me once. I didn't mean to hurt you, she choked out. Leonard threatened my tenure, said he'd ruin me if I didn't play along. So you chose to torch our marriage instead, I said. I thought I could manage it, she said, tears streaming. Thought it'd be temporary, just till I secured tenure and could move departments. But Gavin kept pushing for more, and Leonard wouldn't let up, and I was in too deep to climb out. I turned off the stove and faced her square for the first time all day. Here's the deal, I said. You're packing a bag and leaving tonight. Crash at a hotel, stay with a friend, I don't care. But you're not sleeping in my house anymore. I'm filing for divorce next week. Keep whatever's in your personal accounts, but the house, the cars, the investments, they stay with me. Marissa wiped her nose with the back of her hand, looking like a lost kid who just had her world flipped upside down. Where am I supposed to go? She mumbled. My reputation's toast. No university's gonna touch me now. Not my problem anymore, I said, turning back to my chili, stirring it while my mind mapped out the next steps. She shuffled upstairs to pack, and I started planning phase 2. The video I'd leaked was just the opening shot, meant to rattle the cage and see who'd scatter. Now that I had a clear picture of the rot running through Westfield University, it was time to tear it all down. But first, I had a call to make. Corey, it's Travis Harper, I said into the phone. How'd you like to pocket another $5,000? 2 days after the video hit, a student protest erupted on the quad in Spokane's Logan neighborhood. A mix of academic purists and women's rights groups had set up camp, waving signs and demanding the administration come clean and fire every faculty member tied to grade rigging. They didn't know I'd been slipping their organizers anonymous tips, feeding them just enough evidence to paint Marissa as both a player and a pawn in the scheme. The story was messy enough to spark outrage but kept the heat on the system's corruption, not my personal grudge. Chairman Leonard Voss tried to plug the leaks the old-school way, backroom deals, vague press releases, leaning on board members to ride it out. But he didn't realize how deep I'd dug into his dirty laundry. The second video drop landed right in the middle of an emergency board meeting called to handle the crisis. Corey had outdone himself, snagging footage of Voss in his office, counting stacks of cash from a plain envelope while yapping on the phone about the usual deal for problem kids. The audio was sharp as a tack. Parents pay to sweep it under the rug. The kid gets a clean slate. Everyone walks away happy. Been doing it for 15 years and it'll keep working for 15 more. By nightfall, 3 board members were demanding Voss's head on a platter. By morning, the Spokane County DA announced a full-blown investigation into bribery and corruption at Westfield. I watched it all go down from my office, fielding a barrage of calls from reporters who'd sniffed out my connection to the mess. I played it cool, all shock and professionalism. I had no clue about any of this, I told a journalist from the Spokane Chronicle. Marissa and I kept work separate. I'm as gutted as anyone to find out what was going on in her department. The quote ran front page the next day, paired with a shot of me looking suitably worn out outside the admin building. The story was shaping up just like I'd planned. Travis Harper, the loyal administrator, blindsided by his wife's corruption, fighting to keep the university's integrity intact while his personal life fell apart. Meanwhile, Marissa had crashed at her sister's place across town in Cheney and hired a lawyer who specialized in academic scandals. She kept blowing up my phone, swinging between threats and begging to patch things up. I know you're behind this, she said during a late-night call I actually picked up. The timing, the videos, it's all you. Your life imploded on its own, I shot back. I'm just making sure everyone sees the truth I've been living with. Travis, please, she said. Name your price. Money, the house, an apology, anything. Just stop this before it goes further. It's already gone further, I said. Way further. The next morning, word broke that Gavin Reese had been cuffed on campus, charged with sexual assault based on a complaint another student had filed, a complaint buried in Voss's files for 8 months. The victim, emboldened by the media storm, had come forward with a detailed account and solid evidence. I'd stumbled on that complaint while poking through Voss's office during a late-night security check. The victim's statement laid out a pattern of predatory behavior the administration had swept under the rug to protect a big donor's kid. A few anonymous tips to the victim and her family had pushed them to call the cops and a victim's rights lawyer. The case was ironclad, and Gavin's high-priced attorneys couldn't make it vanish like his past screw-ups. Marissa called me in tears after the arrest hit the news. They're saying I enabled him, she sobbed, that I helped cover up an assault by fixing his grades and keeping him enrolled. Did you? I asked, voice flat. I didn't know, she said. Leonard never told me about the other complaints. I thought it was just the grades, not... She cut herself off, probably realizing how bad it sounded. Not about our marriage, I said. Don't make it sound like that. Like what? Like the truth. That ended the call, but I could tell she was starting to grasp the full weight of the machine she'd been part of. The grade fixes weren't just cheating, they were cogs in a system that shielded predators and silenced victims for donor cash. Corey caught me in the parking lot that afternoon, popping up with his usual flair for drama. Gavin's lawyer's floating plea deals, he said, no preamble. Rumor is he'll snitch on others to shave his sentences. Others meaning faculty who knew about the complaints, admins who buried evidence, anyone who took a cut to look the other way. His grin was razor sharp. Your wife's name's on a lot of paperwork. I handed him another envelope of cash. What else you got? Bank records showing payments from the Reese family to a shell company tied to Voss's wife, he said. Pay stubs for faculty who got mystery bonuses right when certain issues got buried. Emails between Voss and board members about reputation management. How'd you pull that off? I asked. He shrugged. Rich folks think they're slick, but they're lazy with cybersecurity. You'd be amazed what you can dig up if you know where to poke. That night I sat in my quiet house. Marissa had cleared out most of her stuff while I was at work and sifted through the pile of evidence Corey had handed over. The corruption at Westfield University ran deeper than I'd ever guessed. A web of millions in hush money and cover-ups stretching back over a decade. Marissa wasn't just caught in Leonard Voss's blackmail. She jumped in with both feet, choosing cash and clout over justice, trading truth for prestige. The affairs, the grade fixes, the buried complaints, it was all linked, and I had it all on paper. I backed up every file, sorting them by type and weight. Some for the cops, some for investigative reporters, others for federal agencies sniffing out education fraud. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet. I wanted to see how far Marissa and Voss would squirm once they realized I held their entire house of cards. At midnight, my phone buzzed. Voss's voice came through, thick with booze and panic. Harper, we gotta talk. About what? I asked, leaning back in my chair. About stopping this before it buries us all. Meet me tomorrow night. Parking garage behind the Hilton in downtown Spokane. Come alone. The line cut off and I stared at the phone, feeling that familiar cold thrill of a plan falling into place. The garage reeked of oil and desperation. I got there early, staking out a spot on the third level where I could watch every approach while staying tucked behind a concrete pillar. It was the perfect setup for whatever Voss had in mind. Dark, isolated, with plenty of shadows for ugly conversations to go unnoticed. He rolled in 20 minutes late in a sleek black Audi that screamed midlife crisis. Even from a distance, I could see his hands shaking as he parked and climbed out. The past week had hit him hard, turning his silver hair to ash and carving deep lines around his eyes. Harper, he called, his voice bouncing off the concrete. I know you're here. I stepped out from the shadows, watching him flinch like a spooked animal. The big-shot chairman who'd bullied faculty for years now looked like what he was, a cornered rat scrambling to save his skin. You wanted to talk, I said, crossing my arms. So talk. He glanced around, paranoid, like he expected cameras or mics hidden in the walls. Not here. Too open. Get in my car. I'm good right where I am, I said, holding my ground. Travis, please, he said, voice low. What I'm about to offer could set us both up real nice. I stayed quiet, letting him stew while I ran the numbers in my head. Voss was about to dangle cash, a big pile of it, to make the evidence vanish. It was the kind of blunt move that had probably worked for him 100 times before. $500,000, he said finally. Cash, untraceable, in your hands within 48 hours. All you gotta do is destroy those recordings and get your student buddy to do the same. Student buddy? I said, raising an eyebrow. Don't play dumb, Voss snapped, his smile nasty. Corey Platt's been your little spy from the jump. Smart kid, good with tech, but sloppy about covering his tracks. Did you think I wouldn't figure out who's been feeding you dirt? A chill ran through me, but I kept my face stone cold. No clue what you're talking about, I said. Sure you don't, he said, stepping closer, his breath heavy with whiskey. Just like you don't know about the extra recordings stashed in my office or the financial docs someone pulled from our server last Tuesday night. Here's the deal, Harper. Take the money and make this disappear, or things get real bad for people you care about, starting with Corey Platt. Funny how scholarship kids suddenly develop drug problems. White powder tends to show up in dorm rooms during routine sweeps. The threat landed with the casual cruelty of a man who'd ruined lives so often it was second nature. Something sharp and cold settled in my chest. "And if I say no?" I asked. "Then your buddy gets kicked out and arrested," Voss said, spreading his hands like he was offering a fair deal. "Your wife's looking at federal charges that could lock her up for 20 years. And you? You lose everything you've built in a very loud, very embarrassing way. Or you take the cash, walk away quiet, and we all move on." I let the silence drag, watching him shift on his feet, nervous sweat beading on his forehead. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady as a rock. "Here's my counteroffer," I said. "You resign tomorrow, give up your pension, and cooperate fully with the feds. In return, I'll make sure the prosecutors know you played nice." His face went beet red. "You cocky little punk," he spat. "Do you have any idea who you're messing with? I've been shielding this university since you were still figuring out how to shave. I've got connections, state government, federal education boards, law enforcement you've never even heard of." "Had connections," I corrected, stepping forward. "Past tense. Funny how fast powerful friends vanish when a scandal gets too big to bury." Voss's hand twitched toward his jacket pocket, and I braced myself, ready to bolt or swing. But instead of a gun, he yanked out his phone. "One call," he said, finger hovering over the screen. "One call, and Corey Platt's just another sad story. Drug overdose, tragic accident, take your pick." That's when the old Travis Harper, the paper-pushing admin who fixed problems with meetings and memos, vanished for good. The new me stepped up, ice cold, sharp, and done playing nice. "Go on, make the call," I said, staring him down. He froze, probably expecting me to fold like a cheap chair. "What?" "Dial it," I said. "Right here, right now. Show me who you really are." "Travis, you're not getting it," he stammered. "I get it," I shot back. "You're a vulture hiding behind your fancy titles, wrecking careers, burying victims, and poisoning everything you touch. Now you're threatening to take out a kid because your little empire's crumbling." I pulled out my phone, holding it up so he could see the screen. "But here's what you're missing. This whole conversation's being recorded and streamed to a private server. Every threat, every confession, it's all backed up in multiple places." His face went white as a sheet. "You're bluffing," he croaked. "Corey taught me a thing or two about covering my tracks," I said. "Bright kid, big future, assuming he survives your brand of help." I stepped closer, close enough to see the panic in his eyes. "So go ahead, make your call. Let the world see what kind of monster you are." Voss's hand shook and his phone slipped, clattering onto the concrete. That's when I moved. My fist slammed into his gut, right in the solar plexus, dropping him to his knees with a grunt. Years of bottled-up rage, every late night, every betrayal, poured through that punch. "That's for Corey," I said, looming over him as he gasped. He tried to speak, maybe to beg or threaten, but I wasn't finished. The second swing caught his jaw, splitting his lip and spraying blood across the garage floor. "That's for every student you silenced." The third hit landed with a sickening crunch, breaking his nose. He crumpled backward, blood streaming down his face, whimpering like a kicked dog. "And that's for Marissa," I said, "for turning her into someone I don't even know, for making her choose between her career and her soul." I stood there, chest heaving, staring down at the pathetic heap he'd become. The mighty chairman who'd terrorized faculty for decades was just a broken old man bleeding out in a parking garage. "Here's the plan," I said, my voice steady as steel. "You're going to drag yourself to the ER and tell them you tripped down some stairs. Tomorrow you'll email your resignation and pledge full cooperation with the feds. You'll give up your pension, sell off your assets, and spend whatever time you've got left making things right with the people you've screwed over." He tried to sit up, spitting blood. "And if I don't?" "Then Corey sends everything we've got to every news outlet in the country," I said. "Bank records, recordings, videos, victim statements, your wife's shell company, your boardroom buddies, your hidden accounts. It all goes live and you rot in federal prison." I picked up his phone and tossed it to him. "Your call, clean exit or total collapse. But either way, you're done hurting people." As I walked away, leaving him groaning in the dark, a feeling I hadn't known in years washed over me. Pure, unfiltered satisfaction. The old Travis would have felt bad about the punches, maybe called an ambulance, probably apologized. But the new Travis got it. Some folks only understand the language they've been speaking their whole lives: power, fear, pain. Now they'd finally feel it themselves. Voss resigned the next morning via email, blaming health issues and promising to cooperate with the investigations. By afternoon, he was on a flight to Luxembourg, probably thinking he could tap his offshore accounts before the feds locked them down. But Corey and I had been way ahead of him. Every wire transfer, every hidden stash, every attempt to shuffle money overseas was already documented and sent to the right people. Voss's Luxembourg accounts were frozen, his wife's consulting firm was under federal scrutiny, and his whole network of corruption was laid bare. Marissa called that evening, her voice hollow, like she'd been crying for days. "Leonard's gone," she said. "Just up and vanished. The FBI hit his house this morning, and it was empty. His wife says she hasn't heard from him in 2 days. Sounds like a guy running from his own mess," I said, leaning back in my chair in our now too-quiet house in Tacoma's Proctor district. "Travis, they're saying I was part of a criminal ring," she said, her voice cracking, "that I helped launder money and cover up assaults." "Did you?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. "I didn't know," she said, desperate. "Leonard never told me about the other complaints. I thought it was just grades, not—" She stopped, probably hearing how weak it sounded. "Not our marriage," I said. "Don't dress it up." "Like what?" "Like the truth." She started sobbing again, those raw, ugly cries that used to pull at my heart. Now they just sounded like self-pity. "I need you," she whispered. "Whatever you think of me, whatever I've done, I need you right now. Don't leave me alone in this." "You left us 13 years ago," I said. "You just didn't bother to tell me." I hung up and blocked her number. There was no going back, no tearful makeup, no Hollywood-style redemption. Some wounds cut too deep to patch up, and some people show their true colors too clearly to ever trust again. 3 days later, Corey Platt swung by my office with news that made every move worth it. "Gavin's spilling his guts," he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk at Westfield University in Spokane's Logan neighborhood. His lawyer cut a plea deal, full cooperation for lighter charges. "What's he saying?" I asked, leaning forward. "Everything," Corey said, sliding a folder my way. "The grade fixes, the buried assaults, the cash his dad shelled out to make problems vanish." He grinned. "But here's the kicker. He's naming other faculty in the game." Inside the folder were transcripts of Gavin's confession, laying out a web of corruption that stretched way beyond Marissa and Leonard Voss. Professors taking bribes, admins shredding evidence, board members trading votes for personal perks. "How many are we talking about?" I asked. 17 faculty, 6 admins, 4 board members, plus some staff fudging records, Corey said, his smile sharp with satisfaction. "The whole house is coming down." I flipped through the transcripts, stunned by the depth of rot festering under Westfield's shiny reputation. Marissa wasn't some innocent caught in a bad spot. She'd chosen to dive headfirst into a system that valued cash over ethics at every turn. "One more thing," Corey said, leaning back. "The feds want to talk to you next week. They think you might know something about the admin side of this mess." "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That you were totally in the dark," he said. "Just a hard-working guy who stumbled on some dirt and did the right thing by reporting it." He paused, eyes locked on mine. "That's the story we're running with, right?" I met his gaze, seeing the sharp mind that had made our partnership click. Corey knew justice sometimes meant bending the truth just enough. "Exactly," I said. "Just a loyal admin who found evidence of corruption and stepped up to protect the university." The Fed interviews went like clockwork. I played the shocked husband and dedicated employee to a T, feeding them just enough to be useful while keeping my deeper role under wraps. They bought it, especially when I handed over more evidence, bank records, emails, recordings, all framed as stuff I'd found during routine admin work. 2 weeks later, Marissa was arrested at her sister's place in Cheney. News clips showed her in cuffs, looking worn out and defeated as agents led her to a car. I watched from my office, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. The woman I'd shared a life with for 13 years was just another crook facing the music. The media ate it up, and I came out looking golden. "Admin exposes massive university scandal," blared the Spokane Chronicle headline, paired with a photo of me looking grim outside the federal courthouse in downtown Spokane. The story painted me as a whistleblower hero, a guy who risked everything to uncover corruption, choosing duty over loyalty to his wife. It was a perfect tale, almost entirely made up. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office as interim president of Westfield, appointed by a grateful board who credited me with saving the school from total collapse. The view from the president's suite was killer, overlooking the quad where students now studied without worrying about crooked professors or shady admins. The cleanup had been wild. 17 faculty fired or resigned, 6 admins facing federal charges, 4 board members gone in disgrace. The literature department got a full overhaul with new leadership and tight oversight. Enrollment took a hit when the scandal broke, but applications for the next semester were already climbing. Parents and students liked the new transparency, the zero-tolerance rules, and the shift toward real integrity. I'd become a bit of a star in higher education circles, invited to speak at conferences about reform and ethical leadership. The guy who saved Westfield from itself. If only they knew the real story. Corey stopped by that afternoon, laptop in hand, wearing the smug look of someone with good news. "Last update on our pals," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "Thought you'd want the rundown." He pulled up a news article from that morning. Leonard Voss had been nabbed in Brussels the day before. Belgian authorities caught him in a hotel with a suitcase stuffed with cash and fake IDs. He was being shipped back to face federal charges. His mugshot showed a hollowed-out man, aged beyond his years, eyes dead with despair. The mighty chairman who'd bullied faculty for decades was just another white-collar crook staring down a long prison stretch. "What about the rest?" I asked. "Gavin got 18 months in federal lockup plus 5 years probation," Corey said. "His dad's company is getting torn apart for tax evasion and bribery. Their fortune's pretty much dust." He scrolled to another article. 3 professors copped guilty pleas to conspiracy. 2 admins are headed to trial next month. The whole network's toast. "And Marissa?" I asked. Corey's face turned serious. "That's the tricky one." Marissa's lawyer worked out a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison for spilling everything she knew. She testified against Voss and the others, handed over financial records, and owned up to her part in the mess. Corey pulled up a news clip from a Spokane station, showing Marissa trudging up the courthouse steps, flanked by lawyers and marshals. She looked worn thin, her hair cropped short and streaked with gray at the edges. "Sentencing's next week," Corey said, leaning back in the chair across from my desk in Westfield University's president's suite. "Word is she's getting death threats from victims' families. Someone chucked a brick through her sister's window in Cheney, so they moved her to a safe house." I watched the footage, studying the face of the woman who'd once shared my life. She was a stranger now, hollowed out by guilt and consequences. "Any word on where she'll do her time?" I asked. "Federal minimum security spot in Oregon," Corey said. "Mostly white-collar types. She could be out in 3 with good behavior." He snapped his laptop shut and studied me. "Do you feel anything for her after all this?" I thought it over, really digging in. Did I feel a shred of pity for the woman who'd fallen so far? Any regret for the part I'd played in tearing her down? "Nope," I said finally. "She made her choices. Now she's dealing with them." "What about you?" he asked. "Any second thoughts about how we played this?" I glanced around my new office. Mahogany desk, leather books, a killer view of the quad where students now studied free from the corruption that had choked Westfield. In 6 months, I'd gone from a nobody admin to the guy who saved the place, from a betrayed husband to a respected leader. "Not a single one," I said. Corey grinned and stood to leave. "Good, 'cause I've been thinking about our next gig." "Next gig?" I raised an eyebrow. "Other schools, other crooked networks," he said, his grin sharp with ambition. "You'd be surprised how much cash people will pay for the kind of cleanup we pulled off here. Want to go bigger?" I thought about it for maybe 3 seconds before shaking my head. "I'm sticking to legit reform from now on," I said. "Your call," he said, shrugging. "But if you change your mind, you know where to find me." After he left, I turned back to the financial reports on my desk. Westfield's endowment had ballooned over the past 6 months, fueled by donations from alumni who loved our new commitment to transparency. The irony wasn't lost on me. By dismantling the corrupt system that hid Marissa's betrayal, I'd accidentally become the poster boy for academic honor. The guy who'd orchestrated a calculated takedown was now hailed as a moral rock star. But the real kicker was simpler. In trying to make myself seen, I'd become more invisible than ever. Everyone saw Travis Harper, the hero, the whistleblower, the guy who saved Westfield. Nobody saw the cold, methodical man who'd burned his wife's life to the ground for making him feel small. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Harper, you've got a call on line 2. Says it's personal." I picked up, expecting another reporter or conference organizer. Instead, Marissa's voice came through, thin and shaky. "Travis, please don't hang up." I should have cut the call and blocked her number right then. But that same curiosity, the one that made me plug in Corey's USB drive all those months ago, kept me on the line. "What do you want, Marissa?" I needed to hear your voice," she said, "to figure out how we ended up here." "You got here by sleeping with your student and taking bribes," I said, voice flat. "I got here by doing my job." "Is that what you really think?" she asked, her tone shifting. Not desperate or whiny, but sharp, like she'd found some clarity. "That you're just the innocent victim in all this?" I didn't answer, letting the silence stretch. "I know what you did," she went on. "The recordings, the anonymous tips, the perfectly timed leaks. You didn't just stumble on corruption, you planned my downfall." I stayed quiet, my pulse steady. "The thing is," she said, "I'm not even mad anymore. What you did, maybe I had it coming, but the way you did it, Travis, the cold, ruthless way you went about it, that scares me." "Good," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You know what the other inmates call me?" she said. "The professor, like it's some big joke, like my whole career was nothing." Her voice cracked, just a little. "But you know what the guards call you? The ones who read the news? They call you the saint," Marissa said, her voice steady over the phone, cutting through the quiet of my office in Spokane's Logan neighborhood. "The hero who saved Westfield from people like me. Folks need their good guys and bad guys. Someone to cheer, someone to hate. You handed them me as the villain and took all the glory for cleaning up the mess." She paused, and I could almost hear her thinking, "You're sharper than I ever gave you credit for." "Smarter than anyone gave me credit for," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Yeah," she said, her tone heavy with something new. "Not just pain, but insight. And that's what scares me. This isn't done, is it? This needs to prove you're not invisible, to show everyone how clever you are. You've tasted power now, Travis. People like you don't stop craving it." Her words hit close, too close. I'd spent years in the shadows watching others take credit for my work, my ideas. Now that I'd stepped into the spotlight, the idea of fading back into nothing was unthinkable. "Some people get what's coming to them," I said finally. "And some people become what they deserve," she replied, calm, almost like a philosopher. "Goodbye, Travis. I hope you're happy with what you've built. More than that, I hope you can live with who you've turned into." The line went dead, leaving me alone in my fancy office with its polished desk and sweeping view of a campus I'd saved. Her words lingered, like a splinter I couldn't dig out. 6 weeks later, a jittery assistant stepped into my office, clutching a tablet like it was a live bomb. "Mr. Harper," she said, voice shaky, "I hate to bother you, but there's been an incident involving Marissa Harper." She handed me a news article, short and to the point. "Former professor dies in prison altercation." It described a scuffle in the dining hall at the Oregon Federal Facility, a fight with another inmate that spiraled fast. Marissa had fallen, cracked her head on a concrete table, and died 3 hours later in the prison infirmary. I read it twice, waiting for some kind of feeling to hit. Grief, guilt, anything. Nothing came, just the same cold satisfaction that the final loose end was tied off. "Sir," the assistant said, still hovering, "is there anything you need me to do? Arrangements, or—" "Her sister can deal with it," I said, handing back the tablet. "Send some flowers, something tasteful." The funeral was small, held in a rundown chapel in Tacoma's Hilltop neighborhood. I showed up late, slipping into a back pew, watching Marissa's sister and a few former colleagues say goodbye to the woman who'd once been my wife. The service was quick, stripped down. Nobody talked about her academic brilliance or her work in literature. They focused on her last months, her cooperation with the feds, her supposed regret for the damage she'd done. It was a polished version of her story, scrubbed clean for the audience, hiding the real Marissa, driven, brilliant, morally shaky, and ultimately her own worst enemy. The real Travis Harper was buried too, tucked beneath the myth of the noble admin who'd saved Westfield from corruption. After the service, I stood outside the chapel, watching mourners pass the hearse. Most avoided my eyes, unsure how to handle the grieving husband who'd also blown the whistle on his wife. But one person approached me straight on, Professor Elise Marrow from the philosophy department, one of the few faculty who'd come through the scandal with her reputation intact. "Travis," she said, her voice even, careful, "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thanks," I said, meeting her gaze. She studied me, her eyes sharp, like she was peeling back layers. "Can I ask you something? Hypothetically?" "Sure," I said, bracing myself. "If someone knew their actions would destroy another person, completely, totally destroy them, but those actions were legal and maybe even justified, Would that person carry moral blame for what happened? It was the kind of question philosophy types love, wrapped in abstract curiosity but aimed right at me. Depends, I said, choosing my words, on whether the destruction was deserved, and who gets to decide that. The person with the power, I guess. Elise nodded slowly, like I'd just confirmed something she'd been chewing on. That's an honest answer, she said, and a chilling one. She turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the parking lot with the weight of her unspoken judgment. That night, I sat in my home office in Tacoma's Proctor district, the same spot where I'd first popped in Corey's USB drive. I leaned back, sipping whiskey, and took stock of the past year. Westfield University was thriving. Record enrollment, a shiny new reputation for integrity that was pulling in top-notch faculty and students. I'd been tapped for 3 national education boards and had bigger schools in places like Seattle and Denver sniffing around, wanting my expertise in cleaning up their messes. I'd gone from a nobody admin to a name people respected, a leader nobody saw coming. But Elise Merrow's question from the funeral stuck with me. Who gets to decide what destruction's deserved? The answer hit me plain and simple. The one with the brains to see through the lies, the patience to stack up proof, and the guts to use it without blinking. For 13 years, Marissa had treated me like part of the furniture. There, but not worth noticing. Useful, but forgettable. She thought I was too spineless to push back, too straight-laced to play her game. She was wrong about everything except one thing. I was invisible, but I'd learned invisibility was the ultimate weapon. Nobody suspects the quiet desk jockey of pulling off a master plan. Nobody guesses the cheated-on husband might be more dangerous than the crooked professor or the sleazy chairman. My phone buzzed with a text from Corey. New gig, small liberal arts school in Wisconsin. Faculty skimming funds, fudging admissions. You in? I stared at it, feeling that old itch for justice, or what I'd started calling justice. Another rotten institution, another shot to prove I wasn't just some guy in the background. But Marissa's last words echoed, people like you never stop hungry. She wasn't wrong. The rush of power was like a drug, and the thrill of tearing down my enemies had woken up something dark, something that kept whispering for bigger targets, tougher fights. I deleted Corey's text without answering and poured another drink. Through the window, I could see Westfield's lights glowing, the campus I'd saved and shaped into something new. Tomorrow, I'd step back into my role as the heroic president, the guy who picked principle over loyalty. I'd give talks about accountability, about holding the powerful to task, and somewhere out there, other invisible folks, overlooked spouses, underpaid workers, would be watching, maybe starting to see that revenge and justice look a lot alike when you plan it right. The phone rang again. My assistant's voice crackled through. Mr. Harper, it's a reporter from Higher Ed Today on line 1. Says it's about your book deal. I picked up, expecting the usual. It was a memoir pitch about reforming corrupt schools and the personal cost of choosing right over love. Mr. Harper, the reporter said, voice eager, your story's inspiring educators nationwide. What advice do you have for folks who find corruption in their schools? I leaned back, already shaping the perfect soundbite. Humble but firm, noble but practical. Keep records of everything, I said. Stay patient. Sometimes the only way to fix a place is to take down the people rotting it from the inside. She scribbled away, probably already dreaming up the headline, Academic Hero Shares Blueprint for Reform. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet of my house, no longer filled with Marissa's lies or empty promises. The old Travis Harper died in this room, killed by a USB drive and 13 years of betrayal. The new Travis was born from that death, colder, sharper, a hell of a lot more dangerous. Invisible? Not anymore. But still underestimated by folks who mistake a quiet voice for a weak spine. Outside, snow dusted the Westfield Quad, where students studied, laughed, and planned their lives. They were safer now thanks to the rules I'd put in place, the culture of accountability I'd built. But they were also living in a world shaped by a guy who'd learned justice and revenge were often the same thing, so long as you convinced yourself you were the good guy. I raised my glass to the falling snow and grinned. Marissa was gone. Voss was behind bars. And I was president of one of the most respected schools in the Northwest. The invisible man had finally made himself seen.